and otherwise impact millions of civilians. Although improved rains since early 2023 have been aiding recovery from the historic drought in eastern and central parts of Africa, they have also led to other impacts, such as severe drought, severe flooding in many areas. Looking ahead, the situation does not appear to be improving. In fact, it looks bleak. Our forecasts suggest that we are moving into a phase where we could experience dry conditions. As most of you are aware of, we have just concluded the 68th Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum, where we issued the forecast for the October-December 2024 rainfall season. Indeed, it is unfortunate that with climate change, the frequency and the severity of climate, coupled with the impact of conflict, further undermining the regional food security situation, we will continue to suffer problems. Honorable guests, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Igad remains concerned about the ongoing conflict in the Sudan. The rapid deterioration of the food security situation in the country surpasses any other region elsewhere. The convergence of conflict and climate, as I said, in fragile countries like Somalia, eastern and northern eastern Ethiopia, northern Kenya, northern Uganda, and other dryland areas continues to impact us. The microeconomic challenges affecting almost every country in the region also cannot be overlooked. Many countries are grappling with currency depreciation, high debt burdens, and volatile food prices, which are exacerbated by the economic situation in the globe. This situation is further compounded by the region's significant reliance on food imports. This event presents an opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of the food crisis landscape in the region and to address the problem at its core. While eradicating hunger is an achievable goal, it requires a fundamental shift in our approaches. There is an urgent need for proactive collaboration to implement sustainable solutions and strengthen our resilience mechanisms against the impact of climate change and conflict. Transforming our food systems to make them more resilient and sustainable should be our top priority in our policies. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, simply responding to the aftermath of a crisis is not enough. We need to quickly scale up our anticipatory actions. We know it's working because we have seen it work, and still it's not being implemented to the scale that is needed. This should not be the case going forward. Let us work together to ensure that the people of the Igad region have access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food at all times. This is the minimum that we can ask for. Our collective effort is the most vital asset in addressing the challenges we face. And I hope that a vigorous discussion will take place here to get us closer to our objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Ware. And you did point out that this event is all about understanding the deeper creating deep understanding of the conflict and the impact of conflict and climate change. We shall be getting more into that a little bit later, especially during our conversation with some of the experts who were involved in the report that we shall be getting to launch here today. Up next, I'd like to invite the Principal Secretary for the State Department for the Arid and Semi-Arid Lands and Regional Development in Kenya, that is Honorable Harsama Kello. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you very much. As he has said, my name is Kello Harsama. I am the Principal Secretary in the State Department of ASAL and Regional Development in the Republic of Kenya. It's a pleasure meeting all of you here today. And I want to welcome those who are from other countries. You feel free. Enjoy our winter. I don't know whether it is enjoyable. So that we also enjoy yours when you go to your country. I want to read a brief speech here. Government officials from different organizations and countries which are here and who are here, representatives from the United Nations agencies, representatives from the Igad member states who are present here, both international and local NGOs present. Ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to thank the Intergovernmental Authority on Development and its partners in Global Network Against Food Crisis for inviting me and the government of Kenya to attend this official launch of the Igad Regional Focus of 2024 Global Food Security Crisis. We are delighted to note that the 2024 report was collaborative effort of a network of organizations working within the region to provide an assessment of acute food insecurity and malnutrition in the Igad region in 2023. Your presence here is a testament of your dedication and commitment to the quest of evolving credible, lasting solutions. We take cognizance of the substantial achievements made by Igad across the core pillars of agriculture, environment, peace, and security, health and social development. As we reflect on the progress made, it is crucial to recognize the collective efforts made by the member states, development partners, and stakeholders. The State Department of the ASALs and Regional Development, which I head, is mandated to coordinate the ASALs and river basin development for sustainable livelihoods. To realize this noble goal, the government of Kenya, in collaboration with development partners, has championed the conceptualization and implementation of programs and projects geared towards building the resilience of ASAL communities. The State Department has achieved several milestones in the recent past. We have strengthened the resilience of communities through community-based micro and high-impact resilience and drought preparedness projects, extended relief and humanitarian assistance to vulnerable households, rehabilitated rangelands, and developed early warning information, among other activities and initiatives. Despite the achievement, there have been a plethora of challenges facing arid and semi-arid lands in Kenya. They include the after effects of the COVID-19, the twin menace of drought and floods occasioned by the sweeping effects of climate change, the invasion of desert locusts, and conflicts that have led to insecurity, just to name a few. It is worth noting that recent El Nino rains led to flash flooding across many parts of the country. The worst affected counties were Marsabit, Garissa, Isiolo, Mandera, Tana River, Samburu, Turkana, and Narok. In these regions, people were displaced in big numbers, and livestock and household items were swept away by floods. As a ministry, we aim to achieve accelerated development through unique and integrated programming for key identified needs in the identified priority areas by communities. We have identified 5 priority areas to help realize our vision, which are: 1, coordination of development of ASALs. That is, we coordinate activities and support initiatives of various development partners in different parts of the country. We also do resilience building, social and cultural integration of communities which live together, who sometimes even have to engage in some fighting. So we do social and cultural integration of these communities. We also do mitigation of the effects of climate change. And finally, on leadership and governance by improving public participation of affected communities in various parts of the country. In this effort, the government has received support from development partners like the United Nations, NGOs, and other non-state actors. That is to implement a program we have called the Ending Drought Emergency Strategy, aimed at ending suffering caused by drought. The priority areas are to support human capital in arid and semi-arid lands, about the health, nutrition, and education, sustainable livelihoods through agriculture, livestock, value chains with a special focus on food security, and climate-proofed infrastructure through water harvesting, road constructions, and development of energy infrastructure. Again, to formulate phase 2 of Ending Drought Emergency Strategy, which will cover the period of 2024 to 2032, aimed at ensuring that drought does not reach emergency level, as our friend has just indicated, or even to reach disaster level. And also to implement and build resilience for food and nutrition security. There's an organization which is actually fronted by Igad, which is supporting 7 counties in northern Kenya. And we really thank Igad for that initiative. We also have a project to implement dryland climate action for community drought resilience. And also we engage in a program called Kenya Shock Responsive Safety Net Programs, among many others. In the spirit of partnership that has coexisted between the national government, county governments, development partners, and non-state actors, I call upon you to continue supporting the strengthening of our collaborative initiatives, humanitarian efforts, resilience building, and development of programs and projects in arid and semi-arid lands. This will cushion affected communities from multiple shocks and stressors, thereby enhancing sustainable socio-economic development of our communities. In conclusion, as we launch the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis, it is my wish that we build on the past year's successes while adapting to emerging global challenges. As we collectively celebrate our success and look to increase prosperity in the region, we must remember that real progress can only be achieved if youth and women are given equal opportunities to contribute in bringing about transformational, economic, environmental, and social changes required for sustainable development. Let me express my appreciation to all of you who have attended this meeting and supported us in accelerating socio-economic development. It is our hope and desire that this partnership will be taken to a notch higher towards achieving our ultimate goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Harsama. I think at this point, we could all agree that listening to His Excellency, Mr. Mohamed Douare, and also Honorable Harsama, that early prediction is actually essential to ensure that either we stop or mitigate the growing worrying trends that are leading to food insecurity in the region. And this moves us to the next part of this program and exactly why we're here, which is to look at the highlights of the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis and Regional Focus on the Igad member states, and to take us through some of the findings and just to get a deeper understanding of where we are as a region. I'm going to invite Ms. Sarah McCarthy, who is the Global Coordinator for Food Security Information Network. Thank you, Ms. Sarah, for doing this.
Thank you. Is there someone from IT who can help? Is it there? Oh, great, okay, great. So Excellencies, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen here in Nairobi, and those who are joining us online, thank you for coming today to listen to the findings of these two key reports on the state of acute food insecurity around the world and in the region. My name is Sarah McCarthy. I'm the Global Coordinator for the FSIN, and today I'll present to you a brief overview of the findings of the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis with a global scope, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Charity, who will present the findings of the regional report. So these two reports are the product of a very strong collaboration between FSIN and Igad. So over the last many years, Igad has been contributing to the Global Report on Food Crisis with the East Africa analysis, and we've been working closely with Igad to generate these regional reports over the last 6 years. Both of these documents are public goods, they're based on data, and they have the shared values. We both follow rigorous methodologies to identify where, when, and how many people are affected by food crises and why. Both documents have worked collaboratively with over 16 partners to create a consensus view of what this picture is. In doing so, we establish reference points both globally and also regionally so that we can inform decisions on resource allocation, policy development, as well as advocacy. In the next few slides, I'll present to you a brief overview of the data and evidence on people who faced high levels of acute food insecurity in 2023. You'll also hear me referring to these people as those who are in urgent need of food and livelihood assistance. And we have to remember, as I present these numbers and these statistics, that each of them is a person, a family, and a community, and it is for them that we present these findings. So in 2023, we identified 73 food crises around the world. 59 of them had data that met the GRFC partner consensus requirements. 14 of them were data gaps, and these are not included in the subsequent analysis. You can see those countries in the map in darker gray. Almost 282 million people around the world faced high levels of acute food insecurity. This is the highest number we've ever reported in the GRFC, and 24 million more than in 2022. The darker countries show those countries that have the highest number of people who are in need of assistance. Sudan experienced the largest increase between 2022 and 2023. But we also see around the world, Nigeria, Ethiopia, DRC, Afghanistan, and Yemen, each of which had more than 15 million people in need of assistance. Almost 62 million people who were in need of assistance were in Igad member states. This is over 1/5 of the global figure. When we talk about food insecurity, it's very important to also talk about the share, not only the numbers. And in doing so, we can capture those countries who also face food crises, but have a slightly, have a slightly smaller population. The darker colors on this map show the countries with the highest share. The Gaza Strip had 100% of its population in urgent need of assistance in 2023, making it the most severe food crisis in GRFC history. South Sudan, Yemen, Syria, and Haiti each had at least half of their population in need of assistance. In 2023, we found that over 1 in 5 of the analyzed population was in need of assistance, and in Igad member states, slightly higher than the global average. In countries that have an IPC or CH analysis, we're able to disaggregate the severity of the food crisis into 5 phases. I wanted to speak to you about phase 5, catastrophe, as it is the most extreme phase of food insecurity, where people lack food, they've exhausted all their coping capacities, and they face destitution, starvation, acute malnutrition, and death. In 2023, over 700,000 people were in this phase. This is more than double what we found in 2022, and as you'll hear from Charity later, it has increased again in 2024. Most of the situation in 23 was driven by the Gaza Strip, where a quarter of the population faced starvation and destitution in the initial months of the crisis there. By March 2024, this had increased to half of the population, and famine was imminent. It was imminent in the northern Gaza Strip. 2 countries from the Igad region had populations in this phase in 2023. What's driving these crises? The drivers of food crisis are interlinked, they're mutually reinforcing. A country with conflict, for example, as a primary driver, is both more vulnerable to and also can experience, but is also more vulnerable to economic and weather shocks. All of these drivers are also underpinned by structural vulnerabilities. High import dependency, government debt, high population growth, income inequality, all affect the ability of households and communities to not only withstand shocks, but also to recover from them. So the GRFC aims to identify a primary driver for each of these food crises. Conflict remains by far and away the main driver in terms of number of people. Conflict increased globally last year, with devastating effects in Pakistan and in Sudan. 20 countries had conflict as the main driver, including one Igad member state, Sudan. Economic shocks are still an important driver. They're primarily linked to the residual effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, as we all still recover from those impacts, but also high domestic food prices, despite the fact that global prices are stabilizing, and the cost of living crisis. This was the main driver for 21 countries, including Djibouti and South Sudan. 2023 was the hottest year ever on record, and the world experienced a strong El Nino phenomena. This drove weather extremes, which were the main driver for food crisis in 18 countries, including Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, and Uganda. Because of its strong links with acute food insecurity, the GRFC also presents data on acute malnutrition in food crisis countries. We saw acute malnutrition continue to worsen in 2023, with over 36 million children under 5 affected by malnutrition, acute malnutrition. Around 10 million of them suffered from the most severe and life-threatening form of malnutrition. Having not faced high levels of acute malnutrition before the escalation of hostilities, the northern Gaza Strip now has an alarming child malnutrition crisis, with 31% of children under 5 estimated to be acutely malnourished. Four Igad member states are part of the 10 food crises that have the highest number of acutely malnourished children: Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, and South Sudan. New, escalating and protracted conflicts, extreme climatic events, and economic hardship resulted in another year of increasing numbers of displaced people in food crisis countries. Sudan became the largest internal displacement crisis in the world and remains so. The highest proportion of IDPs were seen in the Gaza Strip, with over 75 to 85% of the population displaced, many of them more than one time. But we also know that in displacement contexts, many of them face much higher levels of acute food insecurity than the host community. Sometimes up to 60% of displaced people can face these high levels of food insecurity. Because we've been publishing the GRFC for 8 years, we're able to present a picture of how food insecurity has evolved since 2016. We can draw 3 conclusions from this graph. The first is that we're getting better at counting people. So since 2020, we've seen an increase in the analyzed population, although, as I said earlier, it is by no means complete, and we still have a number of data gaps. At the same time, we're seeing an increase in the number of people who are in need of assistance. So those are the yellow and the orange bars that you see in front of you. This is increasing year on year because of conflicts and economic shocks and weather extremes, and we see a jump again in 2020. We also see that the share in population in need of assistance, so of the people that we count who needs that assistance, has close to doubled since 2016, again with another jump in 2020 following the COVID pandemic. And there's one other finding that this analysis can show us, which is that most of the people who are facing high levels of acute food insecurity are in just 19 protracted major food crises. They account for up to 80% of the population identified as being in need each year. We have 4 Igad member states who contribute to this: Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and with that, I'll hand over to Charity.
Thank you, Sarah. Honorables, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, I take this opportunity to present to you the key findings of the Igad Regional Focus of the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis. Let me start by emphasizing what Sarah said, that the figures that I'm going to share with you are not just any abstract figures or statistics, but lives of people who live among us. Regionally, acute food insecurity worsened for the 5th consecutive year, largely driven by the humanitarian emergency in the Sudan, outpacing notable improvements in countries like Kenya and Somalia. Based on available data as of mid this year, an estimated 62.9 million people face high levels of acute food insecurity across 7 Igad member states. This represents a 1 million increase compared to 61.9 million in 2023. Looking at the map in front of you, the Sudan has the largest number of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity at 25.6 million. It's followed by Ethiopia at 21 to 22 million and South Sudan at 7.1 million. A deeper look into the countries, improvements were noted in Kenya, Somalia, and South Sudan, with the number of acutely food insecure people in these countries decreasing by 3.5 million, 2.6 million, and 0.6 million respectively compared to 2023. Sorry about that. Notable deteriorations were also noted in Sudan, Ethiopia, and Uganda. However, in Djibouti, the situation remained stable. Moving on to the share or the magnitude of acutely food insecure people in the region, an estimated 25% of the analyzed population are in this category or contribute to this share. In terms of prevalence, of course, South Sudan and Sudan have the highest prevalence, with well over half of their population in need of urgent food and livelihood assistance, as you can see on the map right in front of you. In South Sudan, this figure is 56%, and in Sudan, it's 54%. The Igad Regional Focus also presents an analysis of the severity of acute food insecurity in 5 countries with IPC analysis. That is Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and the Sudan. Catastrophe, or IPC Phase 5, is the most extreme phase of food insecurity. Populations in this phase have an extreme lack of food and other basic needs even after full employment of their coping capacities. Starvation and extremely critical acute malnutrition levels are evident. This year, 834,300 people are estimated to be in catastrophe in the Sudan and South Sudan. 755,300 are in the Sudan, which is an increase from 0 in 2023. And about 79,000 are in South Sudan, from 43,000 in 2023. In South Sudan, this includes about 28,000 returnees from the Sudan. On a positive note, no one is projected in this phase in Somalia, an improvement from over 40,000 in 2023. $12 million people across the 5 countries with IPC analysis, again, which are Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and the Sudan, face emergency, which is IPC phase 4. The Sudan happens to have the largest number of people in this phase at 8.5 million, which is a 36% increase from 6.3 million in 2023. In the other 4 countries, the population in IPC phase 4 decreased, most significantly in Kenya and Somalia. Crisis is the next most severe phase of acute food insecurity. Populations in this phase need urgent action to protect their livelihoods and reduce food consumption gaps. This year, an estimated 26.1 million people are classified in this phase across the 5 countries with IPC analysis. And this is a decrease from 27.9 million in 2023, again primarily due to improvements in Kenya and Somalia. 30.8 million people are in IPC phase 2, or what we call stressed, and in need of livelihood support and resilience building. Of most concern are the 17 million people classified in this phase in Sudan, and who are at risk of transitioning into worse-off phases. In terms of trends over the years, levels of acute food insecurity in the region remained relatively stable through 2019. But with the convergence of multiple shocks, they have since increased rapidly. When you look at the graph right in front of you, you can see that between 2020 and 2022, there were more than 10 million additional people each year facing high levels of acute food insecurity. Between 2023 and 2022, the number increased by about 6 million, and in 2024, by about 1 million compared to 2023. So, what then is driving these high levels of acute food insecurity in the region? The high numbers of acutely food insecure people that we have just seen are a result of a convergence of multiple shocks, as earlier stated, and these are compounded by structural vulnerabilities, such as high levels of poverty, low literacy levels, and high levels of inequalities. The shocks include climate extremes. While improved rains during the October to December 2023 rainfall season, this was mainly attributed to the El Nino phenomenon, and the March to May 2024 season have aided recovery from the 2020 to 2023 drought. They also caused severe flooding in parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, resulting in the loss of lives and livelihoods, disrupting livelihoods, causing loss of livestock as well, displacing populations, and distracting farmlands and critical infrastructure. Other parts of the region, such as northern Ethiopia and the unimodal parts of Uganda, experienced below average rains during the June to September 2023 rainfall, negatively impacting agricultural production and leading to an earlier than usual lean season. In addition is conflict. We are all aware of the devastation that conflict has caused in the Sudan, including disrupting livelihoods and triggering one of the world's largest displacement crises, as you have heard from Sarah. Intercommunal violence, resource-based conflict, and/or cattle raiding or rustling are also affecting parts of Ethiopia, localized parts of Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and Uganda, and this has really disrupted livelihoods. Adverse macroeconomic conditions characterized by local currency depreciation, low foreign currency reserves, high debt burden, high inflation rates is also another driver. And this has continued to restrict food access across nearly all countries in the region. Basically, these factors have limited households' purchasing power, which then means they have limited access to food. Now, shifting our focus to malnutrition. Acute malnutrition among children and women remains concerning in the region. And this is attributed to persistent underlying drivers, including lack of food, inadequate services pertaining health and nutrition, as well as poor feeding practices. And these have been exacerbated by escalating conflicts, economic shocks, as well as climate extremes in the region, including the long-running effects of the 2020 to 2023 drought. At the moment, 11.4 million children under the age of 5 years are estimated to be acutely malnourished in the region. 2.8 million of them severely so. High numbers of acutely malnourished children are found in Ethiopia with 4.1 million, and the Sudan with 3.7 million, followed by Somalia, South Sudan, and Kenya. 3.9 million pregnant and lactating women are also estimated to suffer acute malnutrition in the region. The Igad region continues to have more forcibly displaced people than any other region in the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis. At 25.2 million, that is 20.2 million IDPs or internally displaced persons and 5 million refugees and asylum seekers, this is the highest number on record. More than half of the region's 20 million IDPs are in Sudan at 10.7 million, followed by Somalia with 3.9 million and Ethiopia with 3.7 million. It's important to note that displaced populations tend to be disproportionately impacted by food insecurity and malnutrition due to their limited access to livelihood opportunities as well as low coping capacity. Zooming into the Sudan, over a year into the conflict, millions experience severe access constraints to basic commodities and services, including food, water, health, and nutrition services. With 25.6 million, or 54% of the total population, in crisis or worse levels of acute food insecurity in the Sudan has reached the highest in the IPC history. In 2024, the IPC assessed a risk of famine in 14 areas, 5 localities, and 9 clusters of IDPs and refugees in Greater Darfur, Greater Kordofan, Al Jazeera states, and some hotspots in Khartoum. In July 2024, the IPC Famine Review Committee concluded that famine was ongoing in the Zamzam IDP camp in El Fasher, North Darfur, due to heightened hostilities and lack of humanitarian access. However, we've not been able to engage with the government of Sudan on this because of the situation there. The agriculture sector in the country has been adversely impacted. Cereal production in 2023 was significantly below average. And while the 2024 June to September rains are forecast to be largely above average, concerns remain due to the spread of conflict to key producing areas, especially in the southern eastern parts of the country, as well as persistent shortages and high costs of agricultural inputs. Seasonal flooding is also expected to exacerbate the situation. As mentioned earlier, Sudan has an estimated 10.7 million IDPs, making it the largest internal displacement crisis in the world. The cross-border impacts of the conflict continue as its neighbors, for instance, Chad, South Sudan, and Egypt, continue to receive high numbers of refugees. It's important to note that even before the conflict, these countries were already grappling with crises of their own, including high rates of acute food insecurity, malnutrition, displacement, political upheavals, as well as economic crises. In this respect, Sudanese refugees continue to face significant challenges in the countries that they have fled to and remain at a very high risk of acute food insecurity and malnutrition. As I conclude, the Igad region remains one of the most vulnerable regions to acute food insecurity and malnutrition across the globe. In addition to having a disproportionately higher number of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity compared to the other regions in the Global Report on Food Crises, acute food insecurity in the region has been extremely severe, with populations in catastrophe, that is IPC Phase 5, since 2016 in South Sudan. In recent years, people have been classified in this category in Somalia and Ethiopia, and more recently in the Sudan. It's also important to note that since 2010, there have been just 3 examples of famine classifications in the world, and they have all been in the Igad region. This includes in Somalia in 2011 and in South Sudan in 2017. Nonetheless, we cannot overlook the notable progress we have made so far through development and humanitarian actions. Indeed, we are not where we were about a decade or so ago. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Charity, for that. Once again, let's clap for them. That's Ms. Sarah and Ms. Charity. Of course, that was a very well presented presentation of the highlights of the report, and most importantly, I liked that you both emphasized that these are just not numbers, these are people we're talking about. I also want to acknowledge the over 90 people who are joining us online from all over the Igad region. I think I've seen a couple of comments. We've seen Tridip, who's asking whether the PowerPoint will be made available. I think the organizers will do that. And then I've liked this comment from John Roberts, who says, with what is happening around the world and how farming is under attack, we must grow food where Africa can become the food supplier first, then the rest of the world. I think we all agree to that statement. Now, I'd like to go to the next part of this program, which is very exciting, and that is to analyze a bit deeper some of the highlights, and this will be through a panel discussion. I'd like to call 5 of my panelists, and I'll call you, kindly take your seat in the order in which I call you. I'll start off with Dr. Abdi Fidar, who's the officer in charge of the Igad Climate Prediction and Application Center. Thank you very much, Dr. Abdi, for joining us. Up next, we have Ms. Amina Shain, the founder of the Gender Center for Research and Development and member of the Peace, and a member of the Peace for Sudan platform. Thank you, Ms. Amina. We then have Ms. Farai Zimunzi, the sub-regional coordinator for the Eastern African Food and Agriculture Organization. Thank you very much, Ms. Farai, for joining us. And then we do have Dr. Nicholas Han, the faculty chair for the Global Grand Challenges, Singularity University. Thank you, Dr. Han, for joining us. Clap for him as well. And finally, joining us on the panel will be Ms. Phyllis Njane, the Deputy Director, Agriculture, that is for the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development in Kenya. Clap for her as she joins us as well. Thank you for that. So I'm going to have overall, 2 general questions for you before we can let some of our participants or attendees ask questions to you as well. And I'll start with Dr. Fidar. We've seen from the report that food insecurity has worsened for the 5th consecutive year. Definitely a very, very worrying trend. So how can governments and non-government organizations and other stakeholders actually better coordinate their efforts to reverse this trend?
Thank you for the question first. In a way, it's actually very challenging because if it's easy, we could have already addressed it. So the fact is that we are on a trend of increasing. It is very clear that it's an uphill task. But the most important factor is to look at the root causes of the problem, which has been listed earlier. It could be the conflict, it could be climate change induced weather events, it could be macroeconomic challenges. Those issues should be addressed. To address those things, that we need to do certain steps. The most important is improving our collaboration at different scales. It could be local scale, it could be national scale, and it could be regional, global scales. Those should be established first. We need to improve our platforms to address those overlaps and disjoint activities. That's first. Is there early warning challenges? I don't believe that is the case now. Now we are providing the necessary information that coming season may be below normal. If that's not coupled with timely action, so information will be meaningless. So our member states and our regional organizations, our other partners need to take the necessary and timely actions. So mostly we hear there is early warning challenges. We get the necessary information in time. But what we are lacking is the action that corresponds to those information, to those data. Another issue that should be taken is building the resilience of communities. Without the necessary resilience capacity, even information will be meaningless. If you are told that this is the medicine that you require, if you don't get that medicine, if you don't have the necessary capacity to get the medicine, knowing the medicine that you need may not help you. So we need our communities to have the necessary capacity. Climate smart agriculture could be one. Diversifying the income of communities could be another. Efficient irrigation methods is also another one. So those capacities should be there. At national level, again, we should have that kind of capacity. It could be the necessary infrastructure. If you don't have the roads, if you don't have trade facilities, if you don't have communication facilities, necessary policies and regulations, then even putting in place of those capacity at community level may not be as effective as we would like. At regional level, again, there should be certain capacities, harmonization of policies, facilitating across cross-border trading. Those capacities should also be there. Another important factor is linking relief and development efforts. Whenever we are doing development, we have to have in mind how those development initiatives will support the upcoming humanitarian crisis, and vice versa. That's also another important. Utilizing the technology now is also very crucial. Satellites are there, so those data. So these are, I think, what I...
Thank you, Dr. Fidor. Kindly pass the mic to Ms. Farai, because we're still sticking to technology and the growing trend that we are seeing. Now, Ms. Farai, how can we utilize early warning systems, and how can we ensure that these early warnings lead to actually timely and effective actions to stop them?
Thank you very much, moderator. First of all, I would really like to agree with what Dr. Abdi has just said. I don't think we have a shortage of early information capacity or the capacity to generate it. I think where the missing element, critical element is is on the capacity, the will to act on that early warning information. And we have seen that happen in the past, where, for example, during the 2023 period, where the drought was predicted, but for one reason or the other, conflicting priorities and other challenges, the requisite action didn't happen on time. And as a result, we saw the results that we saw in terms of the increasing or escalation of the numbers that are food insecurity. So I would also like to agree that in a general sense, the systems being in place for early warning, being in place, I think really we need now to focus on how do we convert to actual action indeed. And from the FAO side, I would like to indicate that over the years, we have also been investing quite heavily in our capacity to support in an anticipatory way on a no regrets basis, communities that are predicted to suffer from food insecurity. And we do this through the provision of seeds, tools, support to livestock, health and production through vaccination, production and access to livestock feed, cash assistance, and thereby enhancing the access to nutritious food. Allow me also to just say that given the protracted nature and the complex nature that was clearly indicated during the presentation of the report, one of the things that I believe perhaps is a missing element is while indeed emergency response, and we all agree it's not adequate, it's no longer enough. We need to have indeed the anticipatory action. But I think often the developmental side of things is usually muted. We talk a lot about the humanitarian development and peace nexus. The humanitarian, yes, is quite strong in terms of the discourse, but often the peace part is missing, is muted in our discourses. How do we address issues to do with peace, strengthening peace, and preventing conflicts? And also, I believe that the development part, development is the basis or the foundation or the broader context in which what we see happening in the region is taking place. And therefore, more efforts towards development to reduce vulnerability, in my view, would be critical. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Farai. Dr. Han, kindly just grab the mic in front of you. Dr. Han, yeah, I'll go to you. There's another mic right in front of you. And Dr. Han, by the time governments actually classify a famine, it means things are already quite dire. How do we, from your experience, ensure that we do not get here? And what are some of the preventive measures that governments and policy makers and most of the people in this room can take to ensure, to prevent this?
Sure, Your Excellencies. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I even answer that question, I do want to just point out that there is something that the region should be very proud of. As you saw in the global report, the IPC is used globally to classify food insecurity. The IPC started here, started in Somalia, and it was the governments of the region that got together, and technical analysts from the region who got together and said, this is something we can use to help inform action. And in fact, it was so successful. It's the 20th anniversary of the IPC this year, and this region should be proud of that. Yes. But that's not enough. So the IPC was set up as a system that decision makers could rely on in a technically neutral manner and through a consensus-based process to shine a light on and to classify the most severe levels of food insecurity using that 5-scale system that you saw. Phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When we get to phase 5, famine, that is not the time to think about acting. That's the time to throw up your hands and say, how did we let this happen? How did we let this happen? because the IPC early warning systems leading up to that phase 5 are clearly in place to communicate to decision makers, you need to start acting early. An IPC phase 4 emergency is enough. Where we have emergencies going on, people are rapidly losing their livelihoods. People are already starting to die. That's not the time to wait, oh, let's see what happens when we get to phase 5. No, phase 4, and in fact, phase 3, because that's where people are losing their livelihoods. That's the time to act, not only for moral reasons, but for economically strategic reasons. It's much cheaper to act there with better results. So to answer your question, the way we address this is by not shying away from classifying famine when famine is happening, right? Not shy away from it. The IPC, I heard reference to temperature earlier today. The IPC should be seen, and classifying famine should be seen as neutral as a thermometer. A thermometer is not political. A thermometer is not an advocacy tool. You don't ask the mercury to go up and down because you like it or not. When it's cold, it's cold. When the IPC says it's phase 4 or 5, it is that, because we built in a whole set of processes of technical convergence and consensus to get us there. So it's a matter of educating decision makers. I heard the sub-regional FAO representative also mention we have good early warning systems now. We've come a long way with ICPAC's work, with the IPC, with FuseNet, with all of the partners involved. We've come a long way to be able to predict and inform when the situation is going to evolve. We need to close that gap. And that gap should be automatic. It should be, and I will point to one good example of a group that's trying to work on this right now, is the World Bank. They have something called the Famine Action Mechanism, where they're trying to close that gap. So it's automatic. Once a place reaches a certain threshold, funds are delivered. Because it should be that automatic. So in short, it's a matter of educating decision makers on how this IPC scale works. It's a matter of creating the legal mechanisms to close that gap and release resources when they should be released. And it's a matter of holding all of us in this field accountable for our work. We are accountable for, when we say we're standing up for the rights of the most vulnerable people in the world, we need to be accountable for doing that in the most professional manner possible.
Yeah, just a quick one. You did say something that stood out for me. Why would governments or institutions kind of shy away from making the announcement, or in a sense admitting that, famine is happening up until you get to classification 5?
Well, I'm not going to go into details on stage right now, but the implications, just like I said, the IPC should be as neutral as a thermometer. That's the way it works. But the implications of when it's hot on a thermometer are huge. Just like the implications when a famine is classified are huge. And different governments in different contexts have certain reasons why that may or may not work to their particular interests. So I won't elaborate, but I think we do have some examples in the region.
All right, thank you, Dr. Han. Let's now go to Sudan, Ms. Amina, because even before the conflict began, there was already a worrying trend in Sudan. And I'm just going to read out part of this question to give context. Since the start of the conflict, about 10.2 million people have been forcefully displaced in Sudan, 7.9 million within the country, and about 2.3 million in neighboring countries. Do we really grasp the magnitude of the challenges that these people actually face? Do you feel as though the world and the people around understand what is actually happening?
Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone here. And thank you so much for having me, and thank you for Igad. I can say, after all this disaster situation, refugee and displaced mean for us, because even me, I'm a refugee, economic hardship, because we lose all our income resource, our job, our homes, everything. Also, it means for us access for basic service. Displaced has made it hard to access essential service like shelters, healthcare, clean water, especially for displaced. Also, sexual trauma. You know, after this war, we facing a very, very disaster situation, deaths and sexual violence and losing of homes and asset and everything. This makes us with a trauma situation, and we also uncertain future causes more stress of us and trauma psychological situation. For women, it is a little bit harder because vulnerable this situation, and the specific needs for women like healthcare, pregnant women, and that without healthcare, it will make them in a very, very difficult situation. All this, I think, can mean for us as a displaced and refugee very, very difficult situation, and this is what happened now. And after 16 months, it is really hard to say what it means for us. It is very difficult.
All right, thank you, Ms. Amina, and we do empathize with the situation, and we definitely hope that, you know, the crisis in Sudan can be addressed as soon as it needs to. And thanks for your brevity for being here and sharing your story as well. Let's go to Kenya now. Ms. Phyllis, currently we're coming out of, 3 wet seasons. And the report predicts that in fact we are going to a dry season, and we know the difficulties that this could come with. What has Kenya done? What measures has Kenya put in place to ensure sustainable, resilient, and inclusive agricultural food systems?
Okay, thank you for having me here. First of all, you should know the arid and semi-arid areas covers 80% of our country, and it is prone to droughts. And also we have around 3 million people affected by droughts every year. But, before we used to classify this country as high and low potential. But by and large, we are now seeing a change. We are now changing the focus to arsine areas as a potential area for production and a potential area to feed this country. And for that matter, there are a lot of things being put in place in terms of policies, strategies, to see that that area is being focused on. We also having programs that are being put across, like the food system resilient project that is focusing on the drought-stricken farmers to build their resilient and encourage them to adapt to the current technologies, climate smart, so that they can improve their productivity and also resilient. We also have a project called Building Resilience for Food and Nutrition Security. That one is focusing on building resilience on food and nutrition security households, the households that are in food insecure. We also have, as a country, we are having early warning systems that is being managed by the Kenya Meteorological Department, and the role, and it's also being supported by Igad, and the role is actually to give us seasonal early warnings, what is going to look like. As you are already saying that we are looking at drought the next season. So they have already informed, and some arrangements being done to mitigate against that. We also, currently the government is also focusing on those areas. The government is going to build like 100 mega dams and around 1,000 big dams, all with the aim of mitigating against climate change and shocks, particularly the drought, because we need to be able to produce even when we have drought. For sure, our country is well endowed. We can't say Kenya is dry when you compare it with Israel. Israel is very dry, but they still produce and export. So we're also gearing ourselves as a country to be in that level, realizing that our country is 80%, so that's where we have a lot of potential. And for that, we also have another program that is called the Kenya Livestock Commercialization Project that is actually aiming to increase incomes of the farmers, improve their opportunities to increase outputs and access market for increased trade in Africa. So when you look at what the government is doing in all this, we feel that we are now refocusing. That is where our mind as a country, because that's where we have the greatest potential.
Thank you very much, Phyllis, for that. Let me come back to you, Dr. Abdi, because at the start you greatly emphasized the importance of collaboration. So what is Igad as a regional body doing to ensure that member states actually share information, warning signs beforehand and utilize the information at hand?
At Igad, we do have a platform, Food Security and Nutrition Working Group, which meets once a month. It's co-chaired by FAO, and there's many organizations. What we try first to standardize the data collection approach. That's one. Without that standardization, we cannot even make the progress evaluated or tested. But before I go down to that, let me say one word about the region being proud of where the IPC has been introduced. It's not something that we should be proud of first. That is, it means we have enough people for the IPC tool to be tested and applied. Exactly, again, we should not shy away from that fact. But it's not something we should be proud of. Without the necessary data, we cannot reach the decision that we would like in order to address the challenges. So we are trying first to improve our data collection approach. We already developed Igad Region Food Security and Nutrition Portal. We are still improving it, but it will be one of the milestones in this aspect. Another issue that we are doing is policy harmonization. Our member states should have harmonized policies. Those policies should not be put in place only. They must be effective. They must be applicable. They must address the root cause of those challenges that we have been discussing earlier. Infrastructure development is also another one. The region should be interconnected. I have read a report which says importing maize from Moyale to Nairobi is much more expensive than importing that maize from Mexico. So we can see how disconnected our region is. Moyale, Ethiopia, and Nairobi, a few hundred kilometers away, but it's much cheaper to import that maize from Mexico. So those cross-border trade should be facilitated. Our member states should take the necessary steps. And as Igad, we are facilitating those protocols. Infrastructure is one of the major challenges. The roads, railways, internet network, those also facilities should be there. The technical capacity of the member states should also be developed, and also we are supporting our member states in that aspect. So those are what as Igad we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdi. I hope you're all enjoying the conversation. Very shortly, I'll just open it up as also that we are not just talking at you. We want to also hear what you think and any questions that you have. And also those who are following us online, we shall be reading the chat box in a bit, so just kindly put your questions there. Ms. Farai, how is FAO protecting and supporting agricultural livelihoods in conflict context to optimize their productivity?
Thank you, moderator. As I alluded to earlier on, FAO has been active over the years in the region, in the Igad region, supporting the buttressing of livelihoods, agriculture-dependent livelihoods against the various shocks, both in an anticipatory manner, but also responding to shocks and crises as they arise. So one of the key areas where FAO has been active is in terms of supporting programs in terms of access or availability of agricultural inputs, such as seeds, tools, supporting livestock, not just from the health perspective, but also from the production perspective, through vaccinations and treatments, as well as in the production and availability of fodder for livestock, realizing the importance of livestock in this part of the continent. In addition, provision of cash, often in combination with these interventions in a cash plus modalities, and also enhancing access to nutritious food. So the idea being that by promoting or enabling farmers, pastoralists to continue to engage in their livelihood activities, then we'll be able to ensure that their response to shocks is better. Again, allow me to come back once again that responding to crisis is not enough. We need to be prepared to act in an anticipatory way, and therefore it's important to continue because, as I said earlier, the information is available, often timely, so the importance of acting on that information is critical. And one of the ways that that can be assured is to look at how we are coordinated across the board, governments, development partners, humanitarian actors, so that we act together to ensure that the crises do not result in the same disastrous impact that we would otherwise see. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Farai. So I'm going to ask Dr. Han a question, and then I'll take maybe one or two questions from the floor. And as we wait for them to get ready, whoever has a question, Dr. Han, obviously humanitarian interventions can provide relief and save lives when famine has already been declared. But then during that situation and moving forward, what needs to be done to ensure recovery from famine and build resilience against future crises?
So one thing I haven't heard mentioned at all yet, and I'm going to encourage all people who want to build resilience and food and nutrition security in general to not just focus, and this is going to sound a bit ironic, to not just focus on building food systems, but actually look at the larger system, and in particular livelihoods, and in particular mega trends that are happening in this world, and more specifically the digital transformation that's happening to all economies everywhere. So now I'm speaking to you from another hat, a hat that I wear at Singularity University, where we look at advanced technologies and where they're going and how it's transforming governments and businesses around the world. If we're really going to build resilience, going back to pastoral livelihoods in marginal lands is a very difficult uphill battle. It really is. I know that's a hard truth because many of us in the room are in the business of doing exactly that, so excuse me. And I'm not saying we stop that. I am going to encourage, if we're really going to get serious about long-term resilience and we're not sitting in this room looking at those numbers 20 years from now, because I've been in this business 30 years, in the same similar situation over and over and over again, as all of us have as well. But if we're going to break that cycle, we need to start to think differently. And we have an incredible opportunity ahead of us right now. It's presented to us. And that is to look at the digital transformation and what new skills, digital skills, which are very easy to transfer and very easy to monetize anywhere in the world, that could be given to a Somali IDP, a Sudanese IDP. They can be trained up in digital skills that they can monetize on a phone, on a smartphone. The rest of the world is doing this, and I'm going to put out a radical proposition that the most vulnerable people in the world, most marginalized people in the world, should be the people who have these digital skills first, not last, first, because it can lift them out of poverty in a very rapid manner. So in short, if we're really going to think about resilience, let's think about building livelihoods that are resilient to climate change, digital skills. Let's think about building livelihoods that are resilient to displacement and conflict, digital skills. They move with you. Digital skills aren't affected by drought. And I think we should have to evoke a kind of a Western concept, a Marshall Plan to empower the most vulnerable people with digital skills that they can use to monetize now. And they can be doing that within a 6-month period. And this could be something that should be done in conjunction with our efforts to improve food production systems and the like. It's not instead of, but with. And I would propose that that's the way that's going to break us out of these cycles. Not doing the same old, same old, same old. Because in fact, I haven't heard anything different than I have heard in the last 20 years. But it's time to think differently, radically differently. And that might mean forming new partnerships and thinking broader than we normally think in our agricultural food systems. And now work with technology companies, work with educational institutions that are empowering people with digital skills. It's happening, and it's doable. So that's what I would encourage, is think differently. Because none of us want to be in this room 20 years from now looking at those numbers continuing to get worse and worse. It's unacceptable, and it doesn't need to happen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Han. I'd like now to open the floor before I come back to Amina and Phyllis. Does anyone have a question? Could be drawn from the report, or could also be, from some of the conversations or points that have been raised here. I would very much like to hear from you. I think we're going to have a mic being passed around. Any other question? Please start by, yes, Your Excellency. Could we please get a mic for Mr. Mohammed, and then I'll come back to you. Barbara, are we getting a mic?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to congratulate and to commend the presenters of the fantastic presentation on the data, very concise and very sobering, in fact. So I commend that. Also to the exceptional panelists for raising issues and putting some of these in context. I have two very quick comments. The first one is actually I want to benefit from the opportunity of all these people here. As I said, we in Igad are very concerned, very alarmed by the situation in Sudan. I have personally lived through the conflict in Somalia. And I thought that maybe nobody in this world should live through two traumas in one lifetime. But the situation in the Sudan is Somalia times 10. We raised this issue, of course, in many forums, including the last meeting in Djibouti. But I want to take the opportunity for the people here in this room, in all your capacities, in all your influences, whether you are officials, whether you are professors, whether you are advocates, we need to emphasize the need to open humanitarian access to vulnerable, to victims in Sudan. I think the professor mentioned, why did we make this happen? We are even beyond there. Why are we making it worse? We need to bring all our collective conscience on opening humanitarian access, observing humanitarian law, not making the situation of the vulnerable people and the victims of the conflict in Sudan not worse than it already is. And I hope that we all can bring our power, our influence, our connections to bear in any capacity. So I wanted to take the opportunity to raise this issue one more time. The other comment is when we talk about whether it's agriculture, whether it's pastoralism, whether it's even the urban economy, we are dealing with droughts, floods. And there is a common theme that goes through both of them, and that is water resources. There is a lot of brain power and a lot of academic capacity and institutional capacity in this room. I would like to focus our attention on the need to manage water resources holistically. We are now dealing with water management piecemeal, either through development of drinking water, boreholes, or for agriculture, irrigation, things like this. We really need to look at water holistically, because when you all put it together and you take the hydrological survey, for example, of either a particular country or the region as a whole, there is enough water, maybe sometimes even too much water. But this water, the distribution, the frequency of the rain, the intensity, so I think we need to focus on water management to alleviate some of these problems. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Mohammed. Barbara, there was a second question over there. Kindly tell us your name and then proceed to your question.
Morning, my name is Ruth Koshal. I work with World Vision. Thank you, panelists. My question is actually from the Ministry, to the Ministry of Agriculture. School meals are very important in terms of providing children with nutritious source of food. And when we're looking at the most vulnerable, and we saw some of those numbers, definitely children are part of that category. How are you collaborating with the Ministry of Education, amongst others, to ensure that children are provided with nutritious school meals, and not just under 5, but also primary and secondary, and both in development context, but also during times of crisis? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ruth, for that question. Phyllis, I believe that's going to you. There's a mic just next on that table. Kindly pick the mic.
Okay, thank you for your question. We have always been collaborating with the Ministry of Education, because the food they want is also produced through the Ministry of Agriculture. By and large, we have had we are forging even stronger collaboration with the Ministry of Education. We just rebranded the 4K clubs, where we are having the children joining the clubs and being trained on how to produce food for them, for the school, and also for the community. And also hoping that even the community nearby will learn from them. That is the starting point, because even these schools have a lot of land, but they're not using. And we know when there's a crisis, even the availability of that food, maybe even within the country, or it is also hard. So we are looking at sustainable ways of how to support the Ministry of Education. Of course, we are also collaborating with other people like the World Food Program. They have that project. They work with the farmers who supply food to the schools. So we're also looking at that, collaborating very closely. So, because food, when you transport food, somebody said that it's easier to import food from maize from Mexico than importing from Kenya to Sudan or something. Yeah, because of the way our infrastructures are and the way also we are socialized. So we need to change our mind and see new ways of improving. And from the Ministry of Agriculture point of view, when we deal with the school children to undertake agricultural projects, we actually bring this food closer to the people, and that means also it's easier for them to access. And we're also thinking these children who are young, we want to catch them young so that they can learn something in the issue of agriculture production, marketing. Actually, it's a holistic program where the child learns even financial management, everything, because we partner with other people who help us to reach those schools in their area of specialty. Even the banks are going there so that they can talk to these children. We are actually growing the future farmers of this country. And the other thing is that there's also a move to have schools have the right infrastructure like water, so that this production can continue throughout the year. And there's a big collaboration between the agriculture and the education, because even the milk is coming from the ministry as a role for the ministry to make sure we have enough milk or enough food in the country.
Thank you, Phyllis. I'm sure, Ruth, you can have a chance to chat with her after the panel. There was a third question here. Kindly stand up and let us know your name.
Good morning. My name is Igad Mohammed Al Hassan, Sudan IBC focal person. My question is there any plan for prevent famine for the countries has a risk of famine like Sudan?
Perhaps Dr. Abdi could take that from a regional body perspective.
There's always a plan by the government and by the regional organizations, international communities. But the main question is, do we have the political willingness to undertake those plans? It is not something that we should not focus on when we know that 25% of globally food insecure population are found in this region, which represents less than 4% of global population. It's not something that we shouldn't take it easily. Our member states should take the necessary actions, should be take the responsibility to improve the livelihood of our communities. As Hans says, one of the most important to diversify the livelihood of communities, to look into livelihood. Those are not climate or weather related shocks sensitive. It could be trade, it could be digital systems, but we have to take that responsibility as a region. International communities can support us. They are not responsible of our shocks. They are responsible for our weaknesses. We have to take our responsibility as a region, as a government. So if you look at the plan of each government, yes, there are activities that we're supposed to address those challenges. Are we implementing those plans? Are we implementing those projects? And as His Excellency Wara says, one of the most important is water resource management. There's no lack of water in this region, but there's no water at where we wanted at that time. Sometimes if you look at pastoral communities, the water and pasture are not found together. So we need to bring those in one place. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Abi. Just pass the mic over to Ms. Farai, because I'd like to take, kind of closing remarks in regards to the conversation that we've been having here, perhaps your own reflection of the report, and moving forward. We're seeing, a trend that has been going on for the last 5 years that is quite worrying. How do we stop this, and how do we ensure we don't get here again?
Thank you. I was really struck by the comments that Nick made, very challenging indeed to all of us. And as a famous person said previously, the very definition of insanity is continuing to do the same things and expecting different results. So I think collectively, really, we are at a very critical point. In order for us to reverse these trends, we need to think differently, as was said. And certainly from our point of view as FAO, we are taking this seriously. We will reflect how can we do what we do differently, and how can we collectively, working together with the governments, with other development players, humanitarian actors, what is it that we can do differently so that the trend reverses, because it's really sobering to see those figures up there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fry. Please pass the mic to Amina. And as part of your final remarks, I just had a question to you in regards to what support should be provided to displaced persons to build their self-reliance. Obviously, you've painted for us earlier a picture of what it's like in Sudan currently.
Okay. I think now for the Sudanese displaced inside Sudan, they need what Excellency mentioned, humanitarian support. But for this humanitarian support, we need to think out of the box, because we know there is a difficulties now to reach the displaced. There is two reasons, because the ongoing conflict there, and there is two areas for the different two parties, war parties. We need to see alternative ways, because if the humanitarian support reach the area for the rapid support, they will keep it for them, not for the other groups, for the other state, and the other side the same. Also, there is a problem on distributing the support. For this situation, I think we have to sit down with the international community, as the Sudanese, with civil society NGOs, to see how we can solve this problem. Because as the Sudanese, we have a strategy for this, and we discuss it too much. But still, there is a problem and difficulties to reach the displaced. The other things for the refugee outside the Sudan, I think there is a lot of difficulties regarding the laws and policies of these countries. It is very difficult for us to have a residential in these countries, and also the residential, it keeps us with the difficulty of bank transaction and everything with doing with banking. Also, we can't look for a job or do like a small business. This is a very, very bad situation for us, because it will keep us with no resource, no jobs, no income, and that and that. And it will create poverty for Sudanese people in different countries. The other things, we need to have opportunity for education. And also education, it has to be with a minimum fees or subsidized fees or something like that. We have to think about special situation and exception policies in this neighbor country to solve our situation and our problem, to stay with a little bit secure situation.
Thank you. Dr. Han, as part of your final comment, I'm just taking a comment from someone online who, they didn't indicate their name, who was asking about how can we effectively prioritize digital transformation for long-term progress in the Igad region when many still lack access to necessities? Should we reconsider our focus on digital skills and ensure it aligns with the region's most pressing needs? Obviously, earlier you talked about ensuring that we also use technology as part of addressing the issue, so I thought that would be a relevant question to you.
It's not an either or, it's a both. We should continue to focus on basic needs. We should continue to focus on building agricultural food systems. I'm just tossing out that we also need to be thinking outside that box as well. So that would be my answer, not either or. I think if I heard the last part of your question, there are incredible opportunities to use technology to improve our humanitarian response as well. As my colleague here just mentioned, just doing bank transfers in Sudan right now is a huge disruption. Using technology to do money transfers, using technology such as SpaceX to be able to get internet access are vital lines right now for people. Vital lines. As a member of the Famine Review Committee, we spoke with a number of people in Zamzam camp as we were doing our analysis. They depend on, absolutely depend upon remittances from the diaspora right now. they absolutely depend upon internet connectivity, which unfortunately is to the whims of SpaceX right now and through various actors that they have access to. These are vital. I like to use the term that internet is the oxygen of our digital era. Without internet access, it's very difficult to thrive. Since these are my closing comments, and since there has been a lot of talk on Sudan, and I share the concern, and as a member of the Famine Review Committee that just conducted our analysis that classified Zamzam as in famine, and we endorsed FuseNet's analysis as such, I want to make 2 points that leaders could consider. Number one, yes, we classified Zamzam as famine, but as was mentioned in the report, there are many areas in Sudan right now that are at risk of famine and could very well be already in famine thresholds, right? We just don't know. So the level of severity that's happening in Sudan right now is extreme. The other point that I'd like to make is fortunately we saw the Adre border open up recently following the famine classification. I'm not going to say it was because of that, but certainly the pressure was there, and this is a vital pipeline for humanitarian actors to be able to act. WFP, I think just today or yesterday, moved its first shipment through the Adre border crossing, which will be a tremendous relief to people. And this is vital that that continues and others continue. At the same time, I have to say, as I mentioned, we interviewed a number of people right in Zamzam camp, civil society actors who are at the very, very front line of helping their family members survive. And I want to emphasize that it's not just the international humanitarian community that can make a huge difference here. It is civil society there. I was incredibly impressed with a group, for example, a concept there called the Emergency Response Rooms. There are IDP civil society structures forming up. These groups need to be empowered. They need to have the financial resources to provide food directly to their colleagues. And this can happen. They're able to move food physically through the commercial trucks in ways that the international community could only dream of. They move it because there's financial incentives to make it happen. We just need to make sure these groups actually have the finances to be able to be that magnet for the commercial trucks to bring food in as well. So it's all hands on deck. It's the international community, but let's not forget about the incredible importance and power of civil society as frontline actors.
All right, thank you, Dr. Han. Over to you, Phyllis. We're coming back to questions in a bit, sorry for that. Phyllis, as part of your final word, I think we'll have about 15 minutes just to open up the floor. Phyllis, one of the questions here is on how agriculture accounts for 30% of Kenya's GDP and employs 70% of its rural population. And this cuts across the Igad member states. How can governments in the region ensure sustainable financial flows to food sector, especially in areas highly vulnerable to food insecurity?
Thank you. As we are discussing the resilience and sustainability, we are all aware that that is not achievable without the right inputs, the right strategies being put in place. You know, there is a role for finances in agriculture because you cannot access technologies, the right practices, the seeds, all these need to be in place. Even as the government of Kenya is talking about increasing area under irrigation to 500,000 acres, we all know that that water can be there and nobody's using. So financial support in the agri-food system is key. And for them to be able to access the right inputs, the right facilities, and we also know that food security is not a function of only production. It's a function of many others. Lack of infrastructure, the roads, the storage facilities, all this needs a lot of financing. And we are aware that the government can only can support and create the neighboring environment. The private sector has a very big role to play, because for us to grow agriculture sector, we must work, all of us. We must join hands. All, whether we are NGOs, international development partners, the civil society, we must all join hands. For the government is trying, but much will have to be done by the private sector. For us, we are doing we have started the digitization of the agri-food system and the farming community. In the Kenya Agricultural Information Platform, where we register them and they are able to access subsidized inputs without a bias or anything, because it is the system. There is also the fact that we need for our farming community to understand. You know, farming is very risky, and no conventional bank, apart from a few, are willing to put money, because they don't know the next season whether you are going to be to produce. Even the season they have given you money, they don't know whether you are going to have anything for you to be able to pay. So we need to come, all of us, not only in Kenya but even in the region, to see how we can mobilize and bring together the stakeholders in this important sector, because it's very important, and see how we can develop financing solution to the farming community at low interest rates, so that they can access the right inputs. Then only can we talk about resilience and sustainability. The other thing is that also governments should try their level best to try to initiate some of the programs in the non-traditional areas like the ASAL. For us in Kenya, we have a program called DRIVE, that is de-risking and inclusion and enhancing livelihoods.
Right.
And the sole aim is to bring financial access to the community in the ASAL areas.
Thank you, Phyllis. Maybe, Dr. Abdi, you have a final word on this panel discussion before we open up the floor to take questions. There's a question here from Mary who says, how can Igad work together with disaster risk reduction in schools as part of addressing food security in schools?
Igad works with the member states, but we don't have a mandate to go down to the at national level, go to the schools. But at national level, we can, and we support. We do have education department, education division, social health education division. With that division, we have the mandate to coordinate with our member states and other stakeholders. But the most important is to harmonize the policies of our governments so that schools will be supported. No child will be left behind without education. No child should not get that opportunity because of lack of food or because of those disasters. Therefore, we have that responsibility and we are ready to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdi. I'm going to take, there's a question right back there, and then from there you will take the second question. Let's start from the back, please. Your name and whoever you're
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Salah Abu Kashawa. I'm Sudanese. I'm supporting Dr. Amina in her point. We cannot stick to the way we are doing business as humanitarian actors and expect different results. We have to change the way we are providing support to the affected people. In the humanitarian sector, we used to the people sitting in camps, and then we approach them with camp coordination and provide them with support. But in the case of Sudan, it's totally different. The displaced people, most of them, majority of them are hosted by their families, by host communities. And you cannot find them in the streets. The only people you can reach them in the way, the old way of doing things, is those who were already in the refugee camps and IDP camps since 2003. But now we have more than 10.7 million, as you mentioned in your report. They are moving to northern states, to eastern states. They are hosted by other communities. So I think the only way, we have mentioned that in FSNWG meetings every month, you have to provide the food to the states, and then it is not necessarily that the humanitarian actors do the distribution themselves. If it is there, it will reach the people in need. But it is not there. We cannot wait for a corridor to be opened with Chad while Port Sudan is open, Gaddarif is open with Ethiopia, Kassala is open with Eritrea, Port Sudan is open with the Red Sea, Halfa is open with Egypt, and it is open with South Sudan. What happened for all of these corridors? We didn't use them yet. So we have to change the way we are doing things in Sudan. And there is something very painful. Maybe Dr. Amina couldn't mention it. There is a slavery trade in Sudan now. Girls and women are taken from Sudan to Western Africa and sold there. It is a silent tragedy in Sudan. We have to mention that. You as Igad people, and you are citizens of your countries, you have to push your governments. What did they do for Sudanese people? Sudan was supporting the countries since 80s and 70s, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, South Sudan. What did these countries do for Sudan? It's not a political intervention only, it is human, and the people of these countries or of Igad population has to act urgently. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I'll take a second question here. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the panelists. My name is Hafsa Ahmed from Sudan Humanitarian Affairs Commission. I'm Disaster Risk Management Sector, from Disaster Risk Management Sector. Mine is a comment rather than questions. As you know, the convergence of multiple hazards, either natural hazard like flood or man-made hazard like war and conflict, causing triple status on food shortage, food security, and humanitarian issues. Also the lack of affordable food. Our main issue is in food security is inaccessibility rather than availability, which is very important pillar in food security pillars. And there is so many efforts made in with this regard. From the humanitarian side, the government agreed to facilitate humanitarian aid delivery via 3 key entry points from Chad and South Sudan, in addition to Al-Fashir, Kadugli, and Al-Ubaid airports. The recent one in August 15, this is Adri border crossing, also to facilitate addressing humanitarian crisis in biggest town of Al-Fashir and North Kordofan. Also, there is an airdrop in terms of food, airdrop in Al-Fashir and eastern of Khartoum, airdrop of food assistance. Also and medicine. We have a good lesson to avoid this people fall in risk famine. This is a Kai Chamber, WFP, private sector, and also rich people from our Sudan, supporting community kitchen called in Arabic Istakia. This is neighboring volunteer groups that have become a vital food lifeline for Sudanese countrywide, especially in Khartoum. Takia distributed up to 100,000 hot meals on daily basis to the most vulnerable people. This is to avoid people to fall in famine or in a shortage of food. I think this. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. We do appreciate your comments. I'll take one final question. I've really been on this side. Let me come to you, please. Sorry, please. And then this is the final question, unfortunately. I hope it's a question.
Yes, it's a question, not a comment. All right. My question goes to Nicholas. You mentioned on the 3 wet season and 1 dry season in Kenya, and we have the 5-scale system. So my question is, for how long? Because for me, it seems like every other time, like the Kenyan case, we have a place called Budalangi. Everyone knows that every year that there is flooding going on in Budalangi. For how long? Now that we have the systems in place, do we expect that once the dry season comes, then it's not a problem anymore? What can you do in your experience of 30 years? What can you do so that now that we are finally at a place whereby if it's flooding, it's not affecting us. If it's drought, it's not affecting us. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Han, you can take that. Just briefly, kindly.
Sure. So the IPC actually has 3 scales to characterize food and nutrition security. There's the IPC Acute Food Insecurity Scale, which is what we've been talking about here. There's also a complementary nutrition security scale. But to your point, there's also an IPC chronic food insecurity scale. And that chronic food insecurity scale helps senior decision makers understand cyclical patterns that need long-term development. It helps decision makers understand underlying or systemic causes of food insecurity that need to be addressed, that lead to long-term situations. So we have that system with the IPC to be able to communicate both of those.
All right, thank you for that. I will take one final question. Just one final question, yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask actually, focusing on the report. I'm Santayo from Ethiopia. I'm leading the flagship program, Productive Safety Net program. So I want to ask, really on the figures that we showed earlier. For instance, if that report accommodate the Productive Safety Net program, that means the chronic food insecure one. Because when we see in our country the administrative figure, and this figure has a very huge gap. So we wanted to know if SAMIN considers those food insecure people that SAMIN covered by PSNP. So that, the figure will be closer, at least, to the fact that the administrative figure in Ethiopia. That's one thing. The other thing is...
Sorry, we'll just have to address the first question, unfortunately. Who are you directing it to, kindly?
Maybe the report, Dr. Abdi will try to...
Just very briefly,
thank
please.
you.
Let me add on that, and Abdi can respond together with... I'm from Ethiopia also. Figure is a little bit exaggerated. Actually, we talked with Abdi.
Your name, please.
Frau from Ethiopian Disaster Risk Management Commission. Most probably the figure is similar with the one that we have in the last 2 years. As we know, things in Ethiopia is changing right now. We have been in war in Tigray before 2 years. We have been in drought for 4 or 5 consecutive seasons, and these 2 things are changing in Ethiopia, and we expect also the figure is improving. So Ethiopia, the government is also investigating in agricultural extension, in resilience building, and something like that. And I think the figure that presented here is a little bit harsh to the country. So we have to, I've presented the real result actually yesterday. Thank you. This is what I have to say.
I have to cut you short, unfortunately. Dr. Abi, as we finish this.
Thank you, Sintayo and Farol. Actually, this figure is from FuseNet. And I am sure you remember we discussed on the phone. So there is a disclaimer that Ethiopia will produce its own assessment, most probably in a week time, if I'm not wrong. Therefore, we will update accordingly when we get the figure from Ethiopia. So this is from FuseNet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's clap for the panelists, please. Kindly take your seats. Well, I do understand that there's loads and loads of questions, and obviously this is a discussion that cannot end here. So definitely after this session is over, we can have a chance to interact with each other and just continue with these conversations. I'd like now to move to the next part of our program, which is just to, let me just get the program, which is just to get quick remarks from some of the senior individuals who've attended this event, and everyone will have about under a minute to just give us the final remarks before we can move over to the official closing segment. I'll start off with the Principal Secretary, State Department of the ASALs and Regional Development, Honorable Harsama Kello. You did speak earlier, but after all the discussions that have been going on and looking at the findings of the report, we'd like to hear your remarks kindly.
Well, thank you very much. I don't have much because I've already spoken, but I have very keenly listened to the panel discussion. I've keenly listened to reactions from teams from various places, and I've also listened to the report, the Igad report of vulnerability from different states. Of course, I can see Ethiopia has disputed and a few others have, which is very normal. We know that when Igad is doing that research, I hope they do in conjunction with the host countries. It is better like that, so that we don't see disputes arising. For us, the 1.9 million figure is correct. Is correct. Some 1.9 million people will face food shortages in Kenya in the predicted situation of less normal short rains. So we are preparing ourselves as the government of Kenya for interventions, humanitarian intervention, relief, food supplies, and other supplies. But I wanted to say that as a country, we are moving towards self-reliance, even in terms of relief intervention. We have learned some lessons during the previous disasters of floods and drought. Of course, we had budget deficits. We appealed to different organizations, UN organizations. We appealed to even NGOs to support us. But those interventions were very rare. I don't know why humanitarian interventions are becoming rare these days. However, the lesson I can report is that we were able to do without those donors in this country. It was a very proud moment for us in Kenya. We were able to feed our people without UN, without any other organization, because we appealed to them for months and months, but support came much later after we even helped our people. And what lesson am I going to give to other countries? Rely less on other people. Please. We always talk about disasters. We focus disasters. The next thing African countries do is to appeal to foreign donors for support, to appeal to foreign donors for food. Let us stop it as Africans. We have the capacity to rely on ourselves. Madam Secretary General, we have the capacity to mitigate these problems of climate change, both in relief intervention, both in humanitarian intervention, and also resilience. Even this resilience we are talking about. we must not rely on foreign donors. We can safely and strategically do without so much appeals to foreign people if we plan ourselves properly. The other lesson we are learning is that we can prevent disasters. We can prevent disasters. Our officer from agriculture has said that in Kenya, we are planning to have mega dams in different parts of ASAL countries, ASAL counties, so that we are able to save water during rains, so that we are able to irrigate various lands. All members of Igad countries are capable of doing that. They are capable of saving water and trying to grow food for themselves. So my appeal, let us strategically develop policies to feed our people using the existing resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Harsama. Let's be self-reliant, he says. Now, up next is the State Minister for the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. State Minister for the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation, Somalia, Honorable Asad Abdirikaz.
Please excuse my voice. I'm going to be the first victim of Nairobi weather, so I lost my voice already. First of all, here my heart goes to the Sudanese people and the Sudanese country. Sudan was one of the most generous people in this region. They helped refugees from Ethiopia before, Eritrea, Somalia. During the Somali conflict, Sudan really opens its university doors. We make estimate that more than 70% of the administration members in Somalia right now are Sudanese graduates, Sudanese university graduates. So my heart goes to Sudanese really. This report, without discrepancy, I can understand the sample was 25% sample sometimes, and I can understand the issue of accessibility to make a very high sample representative. But we are not distributing as a Somali government right now with that much, keeping in mind the sample, the small sample of representative. Igad member of states and other UN representatives, distinguished guests, I'm delighted to be here today for the launch of the Igad Regional Focus of 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis. As we know, our region, Igad region, a land of great potential, has faced significant challenges, and we are entering a new world, a dangerous period of political instability, economic and financial volatility. The food security situation in the Igad region remains precarious. The protracted conflicts in the certain member states, coupled with the ongoing effects of climate change, have severely undermined agricultural productivity and disrupted food supply chains. About 29 million people across the Igad region are currently facing a high level of acute food insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a crucial juncture where we can pave the way for a brighter future by addressing these challenges and capitalizing on the opportunities that lie before us. As representatives from our member states, we have a responsibility to confront this crisis heads-on and take decisive action to safeguard the well-being of our people. We must implement climate adaptation and mitigation strategies to address its effects. This involves promoting climate-resilient agriculture, water management, sustainable land use practice, and investing in climate-smart infrastructure. Additionally, nature-based solutions such as deforestation and ecosystem restoration can help combat land degradation and protect our biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the knowledge, resource, and collectively we will able to transform our food systems and ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. It's through our commitment, collaboration, determination that we can overcome the challenge and seize the opportunity that lie before us. I'm confident that the close cooperation between the Igad member states with the international partners, we will yield desired results. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That is the State Minister for the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation in Somalia, Honorable Igad Abdirizak. Now, Honorable Abdirizak, the beauty about being in Kenya and in Nairobi is that if it's too cold here, just take a quick trip down to the coast and enjoy the beaches from that side. Up next, we have the Undersecretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security from South Sudan, Honorable John Kanisio.
Excellencies and honorable representatives of IGAD member states, IGAD Secretariat, FSIN, and partner agencies who are represented here. Most importantly, the government of Kenya, the host. Ladies and gentlemen, mine is not actually a written speech, but just remarks on what has transpired actually from the discussions and presentations. I want to thank the organizers for inviting us for this regional focus on IGAD member states of the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis. I must first admit that the report, especially the part about South Sudan, is factual. I don't have any disagreement. The report, in what it highlighted, was clear and to the point, and reflects actually the situation on the ground in as far as the IPC reports, are concerned. What I think should happen is the dissemination of this report within the country, because the aim is to educate the policymakers, to educate the general public, to trigger action. Because we can excel in writing reports, but by the end of the day, if it does not translate into actions, then we have fallen short of our mission. We also, from what I picked, need to really look at the chronic food insecurity. And this is going to FSIN and IPC Global unit, that since we have been talking over and again about the systemic, the structural causes of food insecurity and malnutrition, let us take it head on, so that the two are addressed. Because yes, first things first, we can run to addressing the acute food insecurity because it's about survival. But when we arrange the causes,
We know the immediate, we know the meso, and we know the causes which are deep underlying all this. Unless we address all of them together, I think we'll just be dealing with, the effects. So let us also give prominence to the chronic food insecurity. As I said, we are in agreement that the conflict, the economic crisis, the weather extremes, aftermath of COVID are all there, both for food security or food insecurity and malnutrition. We agree with the figures that are there. So this brings me to the way forward. Yes, we spoke about the anticipatory actions and early warning. It is true. But how do we do it? Suggestions are here and there. But we really need to also address it as Igad. What specifically? Yes, member states can come up with their, actions, strategies, plans. We also have it at the regional level. But how do we give, or what spirit is needed to get this done beyond the humanitarian actions? I think in humanitarian actions, we move, we deliver, but what about resilience building? What about development? Up to now, I don't think we have gone beyond the plans and strategies which are on, in our documents. At the continental level, we have got the CADEP, the Comprehensive Agriculture Development, program. We have the national investment plans for agriculture. At the Igad level, we have. At the EAC, we have. And I think for other, regional bodies. How do we really make this happen? And even at the global level, we have the SDGs, rather than, talking about them. I think this is a challenge. Specifically, we need to really map now the regional strategies and plans and monitor them in a similar way to what we are doing with the, with the IPC. Because, yes, this is the crisis. Now let us also monitor the actions that we are doing so that we see, if there is any pattern. Failure here means that. Success here will actually diminish the results. So that now it is a form of accountability. We also need to learn practical lessons from countries on the continent. I just have the example of Morocco. When it was struck by natural disasters, Morocco did it all by itself. It even rejected, assistance from one of its most intimate partners. This goes with actually what my colleague just mentioned. We need to learn how even in countries of the north, who have also natural disasters. We know the US, we know Europe, but how are they coping with it? Practical lessons, relying on ourselves, rather than actually all the time, throw it outside. So we need to strike also a balance between humanitarian and development actions. We need to have a better dialogue, with our partners. To be honest, if you look at the humanitarian budget, like in my country, South Sudan, it can outstrip the national budget. If we are talking about resilience, if we are talking about development, why not actually strike a balance between the two? You put billions in humanitarian assistance, definitely needed. That is an imperative. But it repeats over and again, and the same need for building resilience is there, and nothing is put there. Proactive regional approaches, I talked about. So, in closing, I know I'm taking a bit of time. In closing, I can say there was a remark that it is the responsibility of the nation state to do what it is supposed to do. But, you know, there are some global, you can say, facts which are affecting what is happening in the states. Let us talk about trade. And to be blunt, trade in arms. It has international ramifications. Arms are not manufactured here in those countries which have conflicts. Why always address proliferation of arms here and not talking about the manufacturers? What is the global governance controlling arms? The same when we are talking about commodities. Many countries which have conflicts have got commodities which are tradable internationally, minerals and the like. The trade is happening unimpeded. Why don't we actually look at that and turn it around so that, you know, we also help those countries in conflict and food insecurity to address them? You have also, you know, the financing. So many things that we can leverage to address those things. This, I'm saying them because the global and regional impact on food insecurity and malnutrition is there. We cannot act in isolation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Knizia. He literally saw me put up the mic and then he ended it. From South Sudan, we go to Djibouti, where we now listen to the representative of the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Water, Fisheries and Livestock, Mr. Muktahar Waberi.
Good morning. Your Excellency, Deputy Secretary of Igad, Your Excellency, Principal Secretary State, Department of Asal, Kenya, Your Excellency, the State Minister of Agriculture of the Federal Republic of Somalia, Your Excellency, the State Minister of Agriculture, Republic of Uganda, Your Excellency, the Undersecretary of Minister of Agriculture to the Republic of South Sudan, Your Excellency, the representative of Commissioner Ethiopia Disaster Risk Management of Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Excellency, Director in charge of Igad, distinguished representative of partner countries and institutions, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegate. Before I come to my remarks, first of all, I want to stand before you today with some disappointment, but also with understanding, full of respect, of empathy. Unfortunately, our Permanent Secretary, Mr. Ibrahim Ilmi, who was due to be with us for this important occasion, and also is the focal point of food security in Djibouti, is unable to join us due to enforcing an urgent commitment that requires this immediate presence. My name is Mukhtar Mahamoud, Director of Agriculture. I'm also the focal point of IPC. I represent the Permanent Secretary for this meeting. It's a real pleasure to me to be with you for the launch of Igad Regional Focus on the 2024 Global Report of Food Crisis. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of the Djiboutian government to Kenya government and particularly the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development for welcoming us to their country to organize this focus, which takes transnational borders. I would also like to thank the
Director of Igad, Climate Prediction and Application Center, for being such a reliable partner in supporting and accompanying member countries in their various national development programs. I would also like to take this opportunity to retain my sincere thanks and gratitude to all the partners who have contributed to realization of this regional focus. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Food Crisis Report is a tool that enables us to better understand the mapping of the global food situation. According to recent report, the global food situation is getting worse, which is alarming. Reports point out to armed conflict, followed by extreme weather events and economic crisis, macroeconomic crisis. As far as the Igad region is concerned, the report highlights the El Nino phenomenon and it considers impact for crisis with major flood following by intense drought in certain regions in East Africa. We have the problem for the macroeconomic impact caused by the war of the concerning Djibouti, war between Russia and Ukraine, and also the crisis of Gaza, because now we have Houthi rebel is a war for the Red Sea. This country delegate is essential for understanding how trends involve and persist in order to provide appropriate response. In Djibouti, the government released a bulletin for the Integrated Food Security IPC framework, as well as data collecting. There are various surveys, such as EFSA, SMART, and EDAM. Also, the map to the country's food situation. We also use meteorological data and data collecting from government institutions, including Ministry of Social Affairs, Health, and Agriculture. In addition, it always worth mentioning the three main pillars of food security: availability, accessibility, and utilization. The availability of food may depend on the productivity of given country, while accessibility, which is part of broader framework, depends on the smooth running of international trade and logistics. The Djibouti depends 19% for the trade or international for the food security. All this information studied by Djibouti National Statistics Institute form the basis of strategy and vision drawn up by the government. Dear delegate, understanding changing trend is crucial on the effort of the Global Food Crisis Network, particularly with regard to data and solution, are of paramount importance. I would like to offer my sincere congratulations to the team behind the science-based report. Distinguished delegate, I can conclude without reiterating my thanks to ICPAG and the Global Food Security Information Network for their commitment in producing this report, which provides us with a joint analysis to make the best decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mukhtar. Now, from Djibouti, we go all the way to Ethiopia to listen to the representative of the Commissioner, Ethiopia Disaster Risk Management Commission, Dr. Malicha Loje.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Once again, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants, and distinguished guests. It is an honor to stand before you today as we gather to reflect on the launch of the Igad regional focus of the 2024 Global Report on Food Crisis. This report serves as a critical tool in understanding and addressing food insecurity within the context of Ethiopia and its neighboring countries. So let's consider the implication of food crisis, not only as a humanitarian concern, but also as a challenge that affects our economic stability, social cohesion, and also overall development. Ethiopia has faced numerous challenges related to food security over the last 3 years. Factors such as climate change, conflict, economic instability, and population growth have exacerbated vulnerabilities within our communities. The Global Report on Food Crisis provides actually an evidence-based analysis that highlights this challenge while offering insights into potential solutions. It is crucial for us to recognize that food insecurity is not only merely a result of insufficient food production, it is often intertwined with issues such as poverty, lack of access to markets, and inadequate infrastructure. From 2020 to 2023, Ethiopia has faced actually significant challenges regarding food insecurity and malnutrition, exacerbated by a combination of climatic shocks, conflict, economic instability, and also the lingering effects of COVID-19 pandemic. However, the 2023 acute food insecurity in Ethiopia was not pronounced as it was in 2022. The major food crises in Ethiopia in 2023 were primarily driven by conflict, drought in some pocket areas of the lowland regions of the country, and also economic shocks. The ongoing conflict between armed groups has also led to people displacement, damage of crops and infrastructure, and disruption of livelihoods. The 2022 drought also, actually which was one of the worst in recent history, has also had also a devastating impact on agriculture and also livestock production, particularly in the lowland areas of pastoralist communities. Prolonged drought conditions have severely impacted pastoralist communities in most of the lowland regions. Inflation rates soared in 2023, driven by rising global food prices and local market disruptions. This has actually made food unaffordable for many households. Ladies and gentlemen, the population of highest concern due to this reason were actually internally displaced people and host communities in the conflict-affected areas, as well as pastoralist communities in drought-prone regions of our country. These groups were often forced to rely on negative coping mechanisms, such as selling assets or reducing food consumption to survive during that hard time. By mid of 2023, there was a significant improvement due to improved climatic conditions, which have improved agricultural productions. However, ongoing conflicts continue to disrupt recovery efforts in our country. In general, the number of people facing crisis or emergency levels of food security has dropped significantly in our country in 2023. As we moved into the late 2023, our field assessment reports indicate that, as already mentioned by Ethiopian team from that side, our field assessment or administrative data has indicated that food security will likely to improve into early 2024. This is the real thing on the ground. Food security trends indicate improving situations compared to previous years. The seasonal crop and pastoral production assessment reports also, actually we have done the reports very recently, the bulk report together with the Ethiopian Disaster Risk Management Commission, which actually shows a decline in the number of people facing severe food insecurity from 2023 through 2024. The cumulative effects of improved rainfall conditions and government initiatives have led to improved agricultural production, both for croppers and also for the pastoralists this time. Looking ahead into 2024, projections also indicate that with the improved bulk, the season for which we have done already the assessment last month, and improving meher rain conditions, alongside ongoing government development initiatives, food security will likely to improve significantly in our country. However, continued conflict in northern and some central parts of the regions and economic instability, leading to rising prices for basic commodities, may remain also challenging. The ongoing conflict, potential flood, climate impact, landslide, and economic shocks are likely to drive food insecurity in the country in the coming times. In general, projections suggest that nearly 10 million, actually this is our administrative data. In general, projections suggest that nearly 10 million people, including IDPs, may experience crisis level food insecurity during the meher production season in 2024 if adverse conditions persist. Finally, to minimize these risks of disasters, the Ethiopian government really prioritizes and recommends the development of comprehensive risk knowledge systems that encompasses various climate-related hazards, including droughts, floods, and pest infestations, involving actually data collection and analysis, mitigation strategies such as already raised by the other colleagues, such as implementing sustainable land management practices, reforestation projects, and water conservation techniques to mitigate the impacts of climate change. These strategies should be tailored to local contexts, actually to enhance their effectiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, strengthening early warning systems and early actions to enhance resiliency against climate-induced disasters is also another important issue that we need to strengthen through actually integrated early warning system development, capacity building for local authorities, policy awareness, public awareness campaigns should be there, collaboration with regional bodies as already mentioned, and monitoring progress through indicators. In conclusion, by implementing these recommendations across various sectors, risk knowledge enhancement, strengthening early warning systems, fostering regional cooperation, and building capacity, the Ethiopian government can significantly improve its resilience against climate change consequences while promoting sustainable development within its borders. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malicha. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost coming to the end of our program today. Just hanging tight. Let's move over to Uganda. Let's listen to Dr. Stephen Biantwale, who is the representative of the State Minister, Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry, and Fisheries. Dr. Stephen.
Thanks very much, organizers and our master of ceremonies for today. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The mood was morning because of the chilly morning. Excellencies, honorable ministers, the honorable members from Igad Secretariat and the other partners, country representatives, esteemed partners in humanitarian response and development programs, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stephen Tibejuka Biantwale, the Director for Crop Resources from the Republic of Uganda, representing the Honorable Minister of State, Honorable Major Fred Chakulaga Bwino, who is unable to be with you, but he is following up what is happening. Excellencies, accept his apologies. Thank you. On behalf of the Republic of Uganda and the agricultural sector in particular, we are grateful for having been invited to participate in this important engagement where these reports have been shared with very passionate ladies. Let us applaud them. They really presented with the heart of, of how the situation should be managed in the Igad region. I thank you. I thank you, ladies, and the gentlemen who supported you. I will not go into details on the statistics that have been shared, but you can see that as a region, the situation is not very interesting. And again, Uganda as a country is no exception. We also have experiences of these shocks, the food and nutrition security challenges, and most of these challenges really significantly affect our people, and especially when it comes to Uganda as a country hosting some of the conflict-affected brothers and sisters in the form of refugees. I think currently we are hosting about 1.7 million refugees in Uganda. And that's what my brother, we were trying to discuss, and then I was called upon. So these challenges affect us as a country, but we continue putting in combined efforts to have these issues addressed as a country and working with the neighbors. I would like also to register appreciation of the different roles played by different partners, both at national and international level, the development partners, the NGOs, and also in particular Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Program, and others. And we really appreciate the effort you put in, especially to make the message get packaged well and known. So as a government, we appreciate and have also faced the same challenges, especially around acute hunger and malnutrition. And this mainly was around the periods when we had the global recession. You know what we have gone through after post-COVID, and also the climate change effects as highlighted earlier. Then some political instabilities in the countries that are having those issues. Therefore, the decrease in food supplies and the disrupted supply chains also affect the costs of food, and especially to the vulnerable households, and also now this exacerbates the vulnerabilities and inadequacies. So as a country, we are convinced that this meeting will explore actions and also come up with strategies to try and address this. And where I would like to bring special attention is how do such reports feed into other ongoing programs as Africa. As we sit here in Kampala, there is an ongoing engagement on the 10-year Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program strategy. That 10-year program is under review. We are completing the 10 years under the Malabo Maputo Declaration, and now it is being revised. So, Igad Secretariat, how closely are we working with the African Union Secretariat so that some of these issues that need attention are also part of that strategy? Ladies and gentlemen, as a country, again, we continuously do our national rapid food and feed, animal feed, nutrition security assessments. And most of this information is available. Normally when we do it, it guides us on a rollout towards the next planning period. Ladies and gentlemen, again as a country, we are currently implementing our 5-year agricultural value chain development strategy, which is hinged or aligned to our national development plan. And amongst the priorities for the agricultural sector include issues that relate to addressing these challenges we are discussing here. And as a government, we have been advised that we must work on issues that relate to availability of seed, stocking material, and breeds that are climate resilient and respond to the economic incomes of our people. So the issue of enterprise selection in our country is critical. And there are various approaches to it. And alongside this, again, the research and breed research agenda is also oriented towards climate resilience and increased high yields and production. Then as a result of climate change again, you know what is happening with the pests, diseases, and vectors. We have produced a lot, especially around livestock. As a country, we now have 14 million heads of cattle, but we can't trade in meat because of the foot and mouth disease. So these climatic change vagaries are impacting negatively on us, and we have been guided to address it. Then the issue of responding again to these issues is around water for production and irrigation. And here we are talking about, and I thank one of the colleagues who has alluded to the very array of responses to this water that is always available, and after one season, again we go back to where we have been. So we are working on large dams to collect that water and avail it for irrigation and livestock. And again, we are addressing issues of micro-scale irrigation because 70% of our people are still the small-scale farmers. And again, issues of inputs. You know, with these challenges, again, we respond by use of inputs. And alongside, again, we go into issues of post-harvest handling and management, and also primary processing. And what is critical here, again, to respond to the availability of food for our people, we have a strategic intervention or to work with people who own large parcels of land to produce food and nutrition, food, feed, nutrition, security, commodities, and crops. And here we are targeting maize, We are targeting beans, we are targeting soya bean, and others along that line. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we are blessed with large masses of water, and we have deliberate efforts around sustainable fisheries. We are both promoting aquaculture, fish farming, and we are also addressing issues around capture fisheries. As I draw towards the end is that, again, as we work with partners, we have managed to secure large sums of resources, about 350 million US dollars, and all these resources are oriented towards climate smart agriculture interventions in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate the important role Igad is playing in its quest to safeguard sustainable food and nutrition security through socio-economic development and systemic promotion of targeted programs related to agriculture, science, and technology, humanitarian aid, trade, food export, conflict resolution, and many other aspects in the member states. Before I conclude, I would like to inform you, ladies and gentlemen, that most of these interventions have bore fruits in the country. And what is critical and painful is that some areas are in abundance when other areas have critical challenges. And I thank Dr. Abdi Fida talked about the issue of infrastructure. Recently, when there was a drought in the southern part of Africa, Uganda had an opportunity, and we were requested, and we had the maize to export 400,000 metric tons of maize grain. But by the time you transport the maize grain from Uganda to Zambia, the cost is about twice the cost of the maize in Uganda. And it is easier to import the grain, come by sea, and they address the challenge. Uganda currently, we are producing 5.3 billion liters of milk from our about 15 million heads of cattle. So Africa is not deficient, but we need to address the issues that constrain us and all of us access this. I thank you very much. On behalf of the Republic of Uganda and on behalf of the ministry, we pledge our support to the Igad team on these issues of food and nutrition security. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stephen. Now just turn to the person, to whichever side, and just tell them we're almost there. Yeah, we're getting there, we're getting there. We're getting there. 3 more people and then we're done, and then we can, interact and talk about everything that has been discussed here. Up next, let's hear from partners who've been very instrumental supporting Igad and obviously the member states. The Deputy Regional Director for UNICEF, Eastern and Southern Africa, Ms. Helena Jovanic. I hope I pronounced that right. Did I? Do forgive me if I didn't. Over to you.
So, just to correct, but to teach you, right? I have learned so much here today, this morning, and my name is Jelena Jovanovic, and I come from UNICEF family. Your Excellencies, honorary guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I have to say, 35 years ago, I was a child and grew up in a war-torn country. And I really felt on my own skin what it means to be hungry, lost, seeing my mother really scrambling and looking how to find the food to feed me and 10 of my cousins who had to escape from Bosnia to another part of the country to survive. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm with UNICEF today and with the UN family, because they gave me hope at the time. And I've seen how they worked with governments. Short term, we talk humanitarian and life-saving, but also educating, supporting, thinking through how we can build a future for our future generations. So fast forward 35 years, here I am today with you all. And I just really wanted to bring the attention to children and women who across every country is a bit different, every context is a bit different. But one thing is really true, and that's the children and women always are affected the most, and their futures with it. We have heard from His Excellency Mohamed Ware. We started with a number of 63 million of people affected in Igad region. We have heard brilliant stats in the report, and I also thank the ladies and the group and everybody who has contributed, including UNICEF. But acute malnutrition levels have risen, you know, and driven by poor diets, conflicts, limited access to health services, right? We hear mothers walking and fathers and brothers walking kilometers to reach the very poor health services. And we have then the climate. Impacts on climate, I have to say, they were not there 35 years ago, but they're very, very present with us today. We have heard that in the greater Horn of Africa, over 11 million children need nutrition treatment services. And I want to go to Charity, right? She said, these are not numbers. We often forget, these are our children. These are precious life, and this is our future that we really need to invest together. So I just wanted to reemphasize, and it's very difficult to stand here after hearing all these strong voices this morning, and you all brought really relevant data, relevant information, and thinking how we need to go forward. And we can't not recognize the humanitarian support that is being given, but they're also constrained. We heard, you know, Kenya saying, why is the money coming so late? Why is the international community? Because the money is redirected somewhere else, right? But this is why we have to look at different solutions. I think Dr. Han was talking about some of them. And this is we as UNICEF, we really advocate for increased investments in food systems, but also in social protection systems. And also to ensure, you know, we need to talk about digital where possible, innovative ways, scales, to ensure that nutritious, safe, affordable, and sustainable foods are accessible for all, from the capitals to the forest villages that we have in our countries. We in UNICEF have, I don't know, maybe some of you have heard, and my colleague Marjorie is here with me today, and she can talk about the First Foods Initiative in Africa. It's one of the examples where we really are supporting local production and consumption of nutritious foods and supplements for young children. But we need to do more collectively. And I think many of you have said this morning, regional cooperation among Igad member states is essential to prevent malnutrition, particularly by addressing the child food poverty, a major driver of undernutrition in sub-Saharan Africa. And this really requires, and many of you again have said, that's why I say my statement is repeating many of your things that you have mentioned, really requires a comprehensive and multi-sectoral approach. So we are behind you. We are there to support you as the UN system. And I know that Rukia will come and talk just after me from WFP, but we really call on all governments, on public and private sector, on NGOs, to really to continue the investment and support those most vulnerable, that are children, that are adolescents, and women in our region. We need to ensure that local communities also engage in sustainable food practices and nutrition initiatives. We really need, they say, it takes the whole village to raise a child. It really is like that. So we all need to come together collectively to protect the well-being of the future generations. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Yelena. And one more person, that is the Deputy Regional Director for the World Food Program, Regional Bureau for East and Central Africa, Ms. Rukia Yakub.
Good afternoon. It's not easy to be the last speaker. After listening all the interventions and have brilliant presentations from Sarah and Charity and the panelists and all the interventions from the member states of Igad, but also the last woman speaker, the last two women speakers in this panelists or remarks. The list of remarks were many, 8, I think 9 of us. So thanks for bearing just a few minutes. I will not make it long. Most of the information I think has already been said. I will not repeat, but I try to just summarize some of the remarks I came with written and some what I have heard. So I think what we have heard today is very clear. I think we are all from this region. We work in the region, and we are familiar with what's happening. So the report obviously highlights, each Igad country is grappling with severe challenges in food security, environment protection, and economic stability. Although the extent of this challenge varies from one country to another. Unfortunately, the key drivers of food insecurity continue to be conflict, climate change, and also economic stability. But the key that are really difficult to fix by this audience are the conflict and the climate change. So until these two key drivers are addressed, please don't lose hope. And please don't stop supporting those who need the support. So we have seen that conflict in Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan, and now Sudan. Unfortunately, Sudan has been hosting refugees from the entire region. It's now a country that's been, its population displaced around the region as well. So this have driven, obviously, millions of people from their homes and into the neighboring countries. Many of these neighboring countries are also struggling with high levels of food insecurity and instability. So as of today's report, obviously we've seen that the number of people needing food and livelihood assistance has increased across the region. For the first time since 2017, famine has been confirmed in this region. All of this against declining funding to address all these humanitarian challenges. Yes, I think the good news yesterday was the Adre crossing from Chad to Sudan was open, I think for 3 months, and that's very good news. But can 1 truck or 2 trucks going through the muddy, rainy season roads be enough for the needs is a question. Can the private sector also be active and be facilitated to also move freely, not just a humanitarian organization? A question I will just drop for everybody. So I think the need to strengthen partnership between humanitarian actors, governments, and private sector entities to find long-term solutions is really, to tackle the root causes is important. We must also strengthen food systems, build the resilience of vulnerable communities, improve early warning system, and seek alternative funding streams, because the dependency on 1 or 2 donors to address food insecurity of people who are affected by the conflict is really very challenging. Transforming food systems. I heard one of the panelists saying also digital transformation. I think if you look at Sudan, I think between 2019 and now, one thing that is helping that the digital transformation that was introduced immediately after the civil uprising. So I think, yes, digital transformation is really important. People are now able to send money to their relatives and families to at least help the little amount of money they can do that. So I think this also includes, I'm not the expert, transforming food systems would include also soil restoration, promoting local production of climate smart foods, reducing post-harvest losses, linking to social protection systems, and scaling up climate-friendly school meals. There was a comment from one of the participants on school meals, and that's really an important one that helps vulnerable families at least get 1 meal a day for their children, and at the same time also attend schools. Resilience programs are crucial in helping people withstand crisis and foster a sustainable future. Climate adaptive farming solutions and livelihoods diversification initiatives such as water conservation, climate smart irrigation, and introducing drought tolerant crops are all strengthening the resilience of vulnerable communities to endure crisis. It's happening at a very small scale, but these are scalable, well-proven activities that are on initiatives going on. WFP, for example, was able to procure from the continent a huge number of grains needed for humanitarian response from Uganda is one of them, Kenya is one of them. So if the conflicts in Sudan is also, although we have still conflict, we're able to purchase from some smallholder farmers within the country. So building the resilience of farmers and also making the markets available is one of the key strategies that we have. So communities on the front line of the climate crisis also urgently need access to early warning systems, anticipatory actions to help them predict climate hazards and also protect their livelihoods from damaging impacts. There are practical and scalable solutions on this as well to help food insecure people prepare for, respond to, and recover from climate shocks and other stresses. While more significant commitment and investment, these climate programs can be expanded to reach even more people, protecting their livelihoods and improving their food security. So I think we will definitely be using this report as we do always, but I think it would be good also to take it a little bit beyond those who know the technical issue of this, to politicians, to decision makers on resource mobilization, resource allocation, to also maybe have an explanation what that means if we don't address these figures. It's not just a figure, these are people. How can we just take it beyond our own? We do have conversations among ourselves, but the decision makers, some of those who are creating these key drivers of food insecurity, can we just take this information as well beyond that? Thank you very much, and thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rukia. We're here. I told you guys. And the conversations that have happened here are a matter of life and death. And for an African tradition, the person who welcomes you to their home must see you off, which is why I would like to invite the Deputy Executive Secretary for Igad, His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Dore, to just see us off, and then I'll be giving you the next instructions right after him.
Thank you very much. First of all, let's thank the ladies who have presented this report, and I'm sure the big team behind them. I share the enthusiasm of His Excellency Dr. Stephen from Uganda for really giving his positive impression on that report. Very well done, very well represented. I think it started us on the right footing, and we appreciate that report very well. Also, let me take the opportunity to thank our representatives from the member states, the ministers, and other officials who joined us. We are here mainly because of you, and we are grateful that you were able to grace us with your presence. Let me also thank the partners who really do the work, for whom all this will finally end up with. We know how difficult it is. We know the challenges and difficulties that you face in the field. I feel for you personally as a young humanitarian worker with the International Red Cross in Somalia. I know how difficult it is, especially on the issue of food insecurity and humanitarian access. That is why I have been a bit noisy about this. Everything that we say whether we argue about this point or that point, we are in a difficult situation. The figure of 24% of our population, when we are 4% of the global humanity, is already disproportionate. For us to tackle this, not only do we need to work together, but we also need to provide reliable information for policymakers, for actors, for activists, for media, for everybody, so that we work hands-on, all hands on deck for the victims of conflict. I remember two particular incidents from Somalia, questioning sometimes the validity or the perception on humanitarian information. It's very common for governments to sometimes look at it from a different angle than the technical people and the humanitarian players. I remember us debating ad nauseum with the Minister of Health of Somalia when there was an outbreak of cholera/watery diarrhea in the IDP camps. Of course, governments have reasons to want to put their perception or their terminology on events. However, it does a bit of disservice to victims when we quibble over these things. More recently, in Somalia, again, there was the declaration or non-declaration of famine in 2022. Whether it was famine or not, everybody acknowledges that there were serious humanitarian situations, food insecurity in Somalia. I say if we have to err, let's err on the side of advocating and helping victims of conflict, vulnerable people. We all said that, the ladies started us by saying that these are not numbers, these are people, these are families, these are people with aspirations. Having said that, Igad is committed to working with member states to produce, to utilize, to consume reliable information. Not only in this particular area. Komlos sitting in front of me, he's the director of our early warning conflict, early warning service. Sometimes our assessment on the nature of conflict in one country or another might not fully agree with the perception of that member state. But we work with member states to come up with reliable and good information. And even if there are serious disagreements, we provide the platform for that member state to have their voice heard so that planners, policymakers, humanitarian actors, activists can use this information. I will conclude by coming back to the situation of Sudan. As I told you, I come from Somalia. Our brothers from Sudan, just 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, were telling us, you Somalis, what's wrong with you? Haram alaikum. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to your country? What is your problem? Now I can't look a Sudanese brother and sister in the face. The situation in Sudan is very dire. When I talk, when Igad, when our executive secretary talks to policymakers, especially envoys from the rich countries, we tell them it would be a tragedy if all the resources, you remember the Paris conference where actually billions were pledged for Sudan, with all the goodwill, with all the technical people, with all the agencies, we cannot get to the people who need these services. Access, humanitarian access to Sudan, especially Western Sudan through Darfur, is a big concern. We call upon all players, all actors, all people of good faith, of goodwill, to work to make sure that humanitarian access is facilitated. It is even more, you know, when normal people, even at the family level, we approach conflict by saying, let's stop fighting, let's sit together, and let us call for mediation if necessary. That's how normal human beings function. But fighting on a national scale, cessation of hostilities is political. In the meantime, people are dying. That is why humanitarian access, ensuring humanitarian access is more important, more critical, more vital than cessation of hostilities, mediation, state building, or any of the other things that will ultimately come forward. Because these processes take time. How long does it take for a child to die of dehydration or to die of malnutrition? You are talking about days and months. I urge you, all of you, don't underestimate your influence, your authority, your power in your own capacity and in your networks. This is the takeaway I would like you to take from this meeting. The situation of Sudan, when it hits the TV screens, it will be too late. Let's all work together to make sure that this does not happen. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Your Excellency. That was the Deputy Executive Secretary for Igad, His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Ware. Now we've come to the end of this program. Thank you very much for being patient. The people who've been following us online, thank you for staying on and for being patient as well. I hope you did not feel neglected. I did try to take a couple of your questions. Special thanks to the member state representatives for traveling all the way and making time to be here, as well as all the panelists and all of you attendees. Now, before we call it a complete close, we're going to have a brief photo session. We shall have, I think the photographer will kindly guide us on how we should do that, but then I think the member states representative will come to the front, and then the rest of us at the back. Charity, is that right? Yeah. And then after which, because we've kept you for a very long time, we definitely cannot let you go without having a meal. So we're going to, you know, enjoy ourselves out at the back and just continue these conversations. And also just to say that my deepest empathies and sympathies to the people of Sudan. We see you and we feel you. Thank you very much. My name is Ian Ofula. I'm the Africa Security Correspondent for the BBC. It has been a pleasure.